So, welcome back again, and thanks to the organizer for having me on two talks. So, in this second one, we will talk about modeling data, of course, and starting from this point one, which was in fact my presentation in Data Quality Days 2022, we will specifically deal with the third point, so enforce a data model, and so an overview of the methods, the most used one, the Autofix, how it works briefly, which are its issues, and proposals of improvement, of course. So, of course, we start from modeling data, and the basic assumption, which is, I think, the assumption of all these days of talks, is that structured data is great, but if we model data in many different ways, they become more or less useless, and so we try to model the same information in the same way so that it can be easily queried, reused, and so on. So, on the basis of this assumption, unfortunately, we know that divergent data models arise over time for many reasons. We have to try to deal with them in order to have them converge into one. So we have to detect divergent data models, decide which data model should be the standard one, and enforce the standard data model. And as we also, so detecting divergent data models is quite easy. Deciding which data model is the best one could be difficult, and sometimes discussions get stuck there. Enforcing the data model is maybe the most difficult part. And about all this process, I have dealt in detail in 2022, and you can see the written text and also the video of the session of 2022. So, an example, one case, martyrs. A martyr can be modeled in different ways, like instance of martyr, occupation martyr, role of subject martyr, probably also others. I started some time ago a discussion at Wikiproject Religion, which chose role of subject martyr as a standard, and then I used Autofix to automatically convert the occurrences of other properties, like instance of an occupation, to role of subject. This seems very easy. In fact, there are a lot of difficulties, not on this case, which is effectively quite easy, but there could be cases which are much more difficult and for which we still don't have an effective solution. So we will arrive to them briefly, I think. And so let's go to the specific part of enforcing a data model. Let's think that we have detected divergent data models and that we have already decided on the data model which we want to make standard, which is not easy. But let's start from the point in which a standard data model exists and we have to enforce it. Let's have an overview on the methods. And these are the methods, at least the ones which I know. If you know others, of course, contribute because it could be very useful. So the basic one is manual editing. Manual editing can do everything, but it's inefficient. It cannot be applied to thousands, tens of thousands of items. Property constraint can in at least some cases show that a certain data model is incorrect and should be converted into another. But the problem with property constraints is that property constraints don't edit items. Of course, they show icons which suggest users to edit items, or at least to notice a problem, but property constraints don't edit items directly. The things which edit items directly are Autofix, DeltaBot fix claims, and the bots are positively programmed for a task. Of course, the most effective is the bot supposedly programmed for a task, but programming a bot for a specific task needs programming skills. So most Wikidata users aren't able to program a bot, although they would be able, for example, to fix the problem in the data model manually. And also, if I program a bot for a specific task, I have to do one time, etc. And this is also not efficient because the few people who are able to program a bot, we want probably to use their ability in a more efficient way. So the two solutions which are not so specific like the bots are positively programmed, but are more efficient than manual editing are Autofix and Delta and the fixed claims operation of Delta Bot, which share some pros and some cons. Delta Bot is in some aspects more versatile and can do more things, but it's also used fewer times, a lot fewer times than Autofix. So I will mainly focus on Autofix. And so let's go to Autofix, the most used enforcement method. What's Autofix? Autofix is a template programmed by user Ivan A. Krestinin in 2017, so it has about 6 years. It is added in the talk pages of properties. Once added, it triggers edits made by KRBot, which is the bot by user Ivan A. Krestinin, which also does other tasks. KRBot does many tasks, among which there is executing the Autofix. Autofix can be applied to properties having data type item or a textual data type, so externally D, string, also URL, I think, and so on. How does it work? Here I have reported two simple examples. So in property talk P106, there are many autofixes, including this one, which is about the case that I mentioned above. So this replaces martyr with martyr, but moving it to another property, which is P2868, role of subject. Another example with a string. So this was an example with an item, an example with a string, the property of VF. And this simply says that you replace an ID ending with the slash with an ID which doesn't have the slash. So this is a simple way to remove the slashes, the final slashes, which some users add to the ID, but which are not stored in Wikidata. This is all about the functioning of Autofix, but and it seems great. In fact, it works very well in many cases. So the idea of Ivan Krestinin was a very good idea, but the Autofix has many issues which can be considered in some cases proper issues, so things which can also be damaging, and in some cases they are just limitations, so things that the Autofix cannot do but that it would be useful that could be done. So there could be both issues and limitations. Of course, issues are more concerning, and I will talk about both issues and limitations. So let's start from point one, the place of storage. The Autofix is stored in property talk pages, and this is troubling on many aspects because the Autofix partially duplicates the information in property constraints, which also means that if, for example, I edit a property constraint, I also have to remember to edit the corresponding Autofix. Otherwise, the old Autofix will continue to be applied indefinitely. So I have to make two edits instead of one. Second thing, they cannot be queried, which is very concerning. The constraints can be queried. Autofixes, of course, cannot be queried because they are in wiki text. They are not structured. Autofixes being in talk pages are not much visible. Many users don't never go to the talk pages of properties, and so they will never see autofixes. Fourth, adding an autofix requires very low programming skills. So to write down this thing, this line of code with the brackets and so on, requires very low programming skills, but maybe some users that edit Wikidata items are not able to add autofixes or to understand autofixes. Fifth, autofixes can be edited by EPs, and this could lead to potentially great concerns for our data, because if used maliciously, or also if used in good faith but wrongly for some reason, could be extremely disruptive. EPs cannot edit properties, but in comparison, editing properties would be much less disruptive than editing autofixes. As of now, fortunately, I don't recall cases of autofixes used maliciously, but if it happens, it could be not impossible, of course, but very difficult to fix. And all the four initial points can also be applied to DeltaBot. The fifth, fortunately, not. So EPs cannot edit the fixed claims by DeltaBot, but all the first 4 points are applicable also to DeltaBot, because DeltaBot bases its edits on a page, a single page, which is the page of DeltaBot. And being the page of DeltaBot is just one, and in that page, all the fixes are stored. So it's also more difficult to reach. It's much less visible, because at least if you go into the talk of the property, you find all the autofixes related to that property, but you have to know that one page of DeltaBot exists to find if DeltaBot is performing some action related to a certain property. So DeltaBot regarding point 3 is a bit below Autofix. Of course, DeltaBot is better than Autofix on point 5, but all of these need to be addressed, surely. Second point, the periodicity and tracking of edits. Autofix performs its edits daily, which is fine, although it happens that sometimes KRBot has problems and doesn't run for weeks. It has happened. So there are some problems of maintenance of KRBot, which sometimes delay the usual schedule. Anyway, daily is fine. DeltaBot runs hourly, which is still more fine, but okay, this is not the main problem. The problem is the second one. The edits of KRBot and of DeltaBot are not tracked in edit groups, and this makes very difficult to undo batches which are wrong. And this is very much problematic, especially connecting it with point 5 of the previous slide. So if Autofix is used maliciously and we don't have a simple way to undo these batches, this could be very troubling. Then point 3, Autofix and also DeltaBot potentially, but with DeltaBot I think it hasn't happened. With Autofix it has happened. This Autofix could have edit wars with human users, or more concerningly with other bots, and Autofix doesn't have a mechanism that stops it somehow if it gets in a bot war. There should be someone else who notices the bot war and ask admins to stop it. So also this could be troubling because it could flood the page histories of items and so on. Could be an issue, and it has happened. Here is an example. I can open it, and if it opens quickly, yes, this has been a bot war between FrettiBot and KRBot, and you see it here. Autofix removing occupation Jesuit. Oh, I have Wikidata in Italian, but I think you understand. Autofix removing occupation Jesuit and FrettiBot re-adding occupation Jesuit for days and days and days and days and days. This is concerning. Let's go on. It has been fixed anyway. All the cases which have happened have been fixed, but other cases could happen in the future. Let's go on. Point 4, delimitations. Okay. These are the patterns which can be auto-fixed. So change the value of the same property. Change the property maintaining the same value, changing both the value and the property, or keeping the same property but adding another value to the same property, or keeping the same property and adding another value to another property. These are the things which Autofix can do, which is good. There are many things that Autofix cannot do, which are here. The Autofix cannot restrict a fix to only main statement and or qualifiers and or references. It cannot be done. I asked for it, but it cannot be done. And I think neither DeltaBot. Although for DeltaBot, I always write if I see correctly, because the documentation of DeltaBot is a bit concise, in my opinion. There are some things which are not so well documented. And so the code of DeltaBot is public. I haven't written it. The code of DeltaBot is public. The code of Autofix is not public. Not the Autofix, but the KRBot, which applies the Autofix, is not public. And but for DeltaBot, the code is public. But if I cannot read the code directly because I have not the programming skills to understand it, the documentation user readable of DeltaBot is very concise and it could be expanded. Anyway, so the Autofix cannot make fixes restricted only to a certain type of things, so only to main statement and or qualifiers and or references. The Autofix cannot manage recursive subclasses. Let's say martyr can have subclasses. There can be Christian martyr, Catholic martyr, and so on. And you could be interested in moving all the cases of martyr, but also its subclasses, to another property. For example, from occupation to role of subject. But with Autofix, you have to write manually one line for each value, because Autofix is not able to understand martyr and all its subclasses. You have to write all items one by one in different lines of code, which is not scalable, because the subclasses of martyr are not many. But for example, if you want to move the types of lyric singer, like soprano, mezzo soprano, tenor, basso, and so on, from occupation to type of voice, which is our current standard. You don't have occupation tenor, you have occupation lyric singer and type of voice tenor. You cannot say to the Autofix all the items which are subclass of type of voice from occupation to type of voice. You have to list them one by one, and they are maybe 100 or a bit less than 100. It's not convenient, not scalable, and so on. And third point, manage combinations of main statements and qualifiers. Typical example is for, let's say, occupation, lyric singer, with, no, this is not good, occupation university professor with qualifier, work, institution where he or she works, university of, let's say, Oxford, and the opposite one, University of Oxford as main statement with qualifier, occupation university professor. If I want to convert one of these two statements into the other, so exchanging what is qualifier with what is statement and what is statement with what is qualifier, Autofix cannot do it. Deltabot can do it, if I understand correctly, only partially. All of these three cases should be managed by the future Autofix. And so let's come to the future Autofix, which is the proposal that I make. Of course, I cannot program it. So I'm making this proposal because I judge very much important and urgent because of the issues that Autofix have, that we program a new Autofix, which has at least the following features. The features that I think are necessary are the following. And the first one, this is the premise. The premise is that because these are very big differences in comparison with the present Autofix and also in comparison with Deltabot fixed claims, I think it's better to write the new Autofix ex novo. Anyway, if you want to take inspiration from Autofix and Deltabot fixed claims, it's fine. I cannot program it. I cannot do anything of it. For me, it's just important that we reach this result. And I think the result we should reach is a system that performs autofixes on the basis of statements stored in content pages. Because both Autofix and Deltabot have, as I think, their main drawback, the fact that they are based on commands, those which I will call Autofix commands, which are not stored in content pages, but are stored elsewhere, either in property talks for Autofix or in for Deltabot fixed claims in a user subpage of Deltabot. But we should make a system that is based on statements stored in content pages. And let's say that it is based on statements in property pages, which is, I think, the best place where to store this, together with constraints, so that we don't duplicate constraints. The Autofix should be performed with a clear periodicity, which is a thing that is already achieved by Autofix and Deltabot, and I think it is fine. It should be tracked in edit groups, which makes easier to undo batches if necessary. And it's a banal thing, it's very easy, but it could be very useful in some unfortunate cases in which a batch should be undone. And then the Autofix, of course, should have some system that stops it in case of edit wars. And most importantly, point 4, the Autofix commands should support the widest possible range of autofixes, including the 3 points that I made here. So restricting to statement and or qualifier and on reference, managing recursive subclasses, and managing combinations of main statements and qualifiers. These are not easy, at least 2 and 3, or mainly 3, are not easy to manage, but having a system that manages them would make a great difference in making easier to enforce also complex data models. Let's go on. And practically, what do we need? I think that the main thing which is missing as of now is a way to store directly in properties as statements the autofix commands. So we need a set of properties which allow us to state in properties the replacements, the things that I call autofix commands. So the replacement commands which the bot will then apply to the items. Because as of now, we are not able to store most of the autofixes which are stored in property talk pages and in the user page of DeltaBot. We are not able to store them as statements. We should be able to store them as statements, and I think that after this, which is the most difficult part, is solved, making a bot which applies these statements as edits is very easy, I think. So we have mainly to create this set of properties which allow to store the autofixes as statements. And okay, so how could we proceed? The proposal I made is stored, the proposal which I also exposed today is stored here in form of table. This table is the table which I have now converted into the slides. I don't know if it's clearer here or it's clearer in the slides. Anyway, both the table and the slides are available, so you can use both of them. There is also a fabricator ticket about the need of an improved autofix, which is open from July and is presently installed, but I hope it will be okay. Here are the slides, very good. And I hope it will be moved forward in the future. And I think the main thing we have to do, and this thing doesn't require programming skills, is reflect on the property we are missing in order to store the autofix commands as statements and propose them, and starting then to convert the autofixes which are in property talks and in DeltaBot page to these statements, which I think will be the most difficult part. And thanks for your attention, and let's go to the discussion.
Thank you, Camilio, for that really interesting presentation. That was great. So let's see, we have a lot of comments and some questions. Let's start from the top. MB, you'd like to speak? Maybe we can start with you. Feel free to unmute yourself, or maybe that was a mistake. Okay, so there is Peter Schneider.
Yeah, this is I am reading it. Yeah, this is unfortunately a problem which comes before enforcing. So as I said, I can also link it in the chat. In 2022, I had a talk which dealt more generally with the issue of data modeling, and of course, detecting the divergent data models and deciding which data model should be the standard are two steps which are before enforcing. So enforcing is only the last part. And in the talk of 2022, which is also recorded, I dealt more in deep with also the first two parts. And yeah, so I very much agree. Of course, enforcing is only the last part. Detecting, I think it's quite easy through queries. And also, if you edit a lot of items in the same area, you will easily come to cases in which you notice, oh, this is modeled differently. Also, with user experience, editing many items in the same area, you can notice that something is strange, and then you go to the queries and you notice that more things are strange. And so detecting, I think, is the easiest part of the three parts. The discussion is very difficult, and of course also enforcing is difficult, and of enforcing I spoke today, and I leave the word.
Okay, we have, I think Peter wants to say something. Peter, you can unmute yourself. Or I could just read out the last question, which I think everyone agrees to. How do we build this cat who is actually going to do the work? Do you have any thoughts around that, Camilla?
Which one?
Like, who is actually going to do this work? You know,
Who is in my opinion, it should be Wikimedia Deutschland or something around it, but it could be also other volunteers. I am not able because I don't have the technical capacity, but it could be anyone. For me, as a Wikidata user, the most important thing is having this. But I'm not very much concerned about who will program it. I think it's priority to program it. This is the most I can say. I cannot say anything else.
Fair enough. Let's see, what else do we have? There was an earlier question about, yeah, so there's this question about many, communities, the Wikidata communities want to model data their way, do things their way. How do we deal with this?
In the sense that people want to model data differently?
Yeah.
This is before enforcing. So you cannot enforce anything if you don't agree on what you want to enforce. First, you decide what to enforce, you have a discussion, you try to reach an agreement, and I see some comments about Martyr. So you could say that Martyr could be modeled in another way. I think that the most important thing is not how we model it, but the coherence. So we can model Martyr legitimately as role of subject, but also as occupation, but also as instance of maybe not, because for humans usually the only instance of is human, and we don't have items with instance of human and instance of Martyr. But for example, occupation could be a viable solution, or an opposite property could be a viable solution. The important thing is that we decide one data model and we enforce it. If the Wikidata community disagrees on the data model, first you reach an agreement and then you enforce the data model. And of course, if you don't reach an agreement, you cannot enforce anything. It's bad. Reaching an agreement requires a discussion, and the discussion could get stuck. I have started many discussions. Some get stuck and are still stuck, and I do other things. And others have reached an agreement, and I have tried to enforce the agreement. Sometimes with better results, because Autofix can do a certain range of things, and sometimes with a result which is partial, because Autofix cannot do many things.
Yeah, I can understand. It would be very frustrating to, start a discussion and not get consensus around it because people don't participate in it. Jean-Fred said, you mentioned how it can happen that clueless autofixes cause issues, and he has some examples in mind. His question is, does your future autofix has some plan for gating somehow its use?
So, for example, my idea is that the autofixes should be stored as statements, and probably as statements in properties. If they are stored as statements in properties, as of now, the EPs are barred from editing properties. So this is already a restriction. I tend to think that maybe we don't need further restriction. If we think that we need further restriction, this would be a case of the so-called granular protection, which is an open fabricator ticket, the possibility of protecting only some parts of an item, which has still not been achieved. But if we think that, for example, the statements containing the Autofix require a further degree of protection, we need granular protection. Otherwise, we cannot achieve this. But I think it could be a reasonable request, but this implies solving the ticket of granular protection.
Makes a lot of sense. I see some comments in the chat. I think people are mostly agreeing with what you are saying.
I try to find the ticket of granular protection. Give me 1 minute. If there are other questions, of course, I can answer.
Yeah, Nikki mentioned an important point about the. Does anyone know if Visual Editor is actually available on Talk Pages?
No, it's not available. This is also when I said what I said about programming skills is also about this. So the only way you can add an Autofix to Talk Pages is using the editor, the Wikitext editor.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine
and
that.
This, I think, is a further reason for which we have to move Autofix commands, what I call Autofix commands, from property Talk Pages or other Wikitext pages to the statements.
Yeah.
Is the fabricator ticket for granular protection.
Perfect. So many comments. Trying to find. So Peter says he doesn't think. I'm not sure what this comment is actually directed to. Your comment about you don't think this. Okay, he doesn't think this goes nearly far enough. So he says, I would prefer a solution that also lets users see the data the way they want. So for example, a user should be able to see tenors as instances of tenors, items with profession tenor, and also items with profession singer and voice tenor.
Yeah, but I think that this having I also so many users can think that the same piece of data should be modeled in different ways, and the solutions are anarchy, but anarchy is the contrary of data modeling. So if data are modeled in different ways as anyone wants, it's basically useless in my opinion. So I would exclude anarchy. Another solution is choosing one which will satisfy most of the users, surely not all, as martyr, as role of subject doesn't satisfy all, and so on. But I think it's the best solution available. For users, having the possibility of seeing a certain piece of data modeled in different ways, I don't think it's technically feasible. One possibility could be modeling the same data in many ways at the same times, which means redundancy. I don't think redundancy is a good thing. I always discourage redundancy, and I think that it is the usual practice to discourage redundancy, but it could be a solution. I think the best solution is choosing one way, model the data only in one way, and the others should go away and be replaced with the chosen way. This is my opinion.
Around discussions as well, Jean rightly says we have many dormant wiki projects, which I believe some of these modeling discussions should be happening on those wiki projects, but of course, many of them are very dormant. What else do we have?
I found. So we have issues with dormant wiki projects. I agree. And also, this is connected also to the fact that our data models cannot be easily found because something is encoded in property constraint, some other things are encoded in autofixes, and many things are just encoded in the wiki pages of wiki projects, which are sometimes dormant. And yeah, so ideally, and this is also, and some others with in entity schemas, of course, ideally there should be one place, possibly structured, where you find all the data model for a certain entity. And it should be a structured page. So as of now, the most complete pages where to find data models are usually the wiki project pages, which is fine to a certain degree, but they are not structured, so they cannot be queried and so on. Ideally, there should be a place like entity schemas and the constraints with autofixes together that encode all the relevant things that make it clear for you which is the data model. But we are not yet here. We want to reach here. About finding the tenors. How can users find the tenors? There, I think there is in the property. Either you go directly, you are fortunate somehow, and you go directly to the property type of voice and you find them. Or if you try to find them through occupation, probably you will try to find them through occupation. You won't find any, so you will probably understand that they are not under occupation, but they are under another property. And I think that in property occupation, there is a constraint that says that an entity which is a subclass of type of voice cannot be a valid value for occupation. I think there is something like that. But then, for example, the autofix that applies this is in the talk of occupation, which is not the best possible solution.
Totally agree. Jean, I'm sorry, Peter says it's not even easy to find a wiki project page for some data. So putting information on a wiki project page is,
And I know if the user is not a human, the reason, especially for users that are not humans, it is fundamental to have the data about data modeling. So the data model should be encoded as statements, because these are more readable, mainly for, probably they are also more readable for humans, which don't find wiki projects so easily in many cases, and they are probably the only way which could be readable for bots. But as of now, many aspects of data models are not either cannot be encoded in properties, or can be but aren't yet. And yeah, we should encode more and more the informations about our data models as statements, mainly constraints, some statements which trigger autofixes. We should encode most things in statements.
All right, we should encode more of our data model in statements. Thank you. I think we can continue having this discussion on Telegram on the project itself. Thank you, Camille, for this wonderful presentation.
Thanks. And I hope the improved Autofix will be somehow prioritized as much as possible.
Yeah.
I'm here. I've been here for many years. I've seen a lot of data models which cannot be enforced, and I hope they will be enforced sometimes. We are still alive, but anyway, if we find the solution, it's better sooner than later.
Yes, I hope so. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating as well.